Get 6 months of local news for just $2. You get unlimited access to the news and information you need to stay connected to your community. Visit inforum.com/subscribe to get 6 months of local news for just $2.
You're listening to Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. I'm your host, Rob Port. If I sound distracted, it's because I've been busy covering this story all morning. I'm joined by my co-host, Chad Oban.
He's right of center, I'm left of center, both sides of the political spectrum.
I think it's cathartic. I think it's a necessary and proper debate. I'm glad we're having it.
And honestly, we have to do better.
Okay, I don't know why I'm getting blamed for this, right? Welcome to Plain Talk, where I got to tell you, so Chad is tired because his Dodgers have been in a marathon, emotionally fraught World Series. Our guest Josh Gallion is tired because he got in late on a flight last night. I, however, am fresh as a daisy and ready to go. So I'm gonna carry the load here in this interview, as the two other participants are dragging a little bit this morning.
You know, Rob, I'm not going to let you pivot off of baseball quite that quickly. I will tell you, I could use a day off today, and there's another game tonight. I'm exhausted emotionally. I might have been a little overconfident going into the World Series. That's catching up to me. But
the Blue Jays,
you held it. I'm sleepy.
The Blue Jays are an annoying team. They are just. Yeah, they're very, very annoying.
They put the ball in play. They're a solid team.
Hey, I did ask Congresswoman Fedorchak when she was on earlier if we could make the Blue Jays illegal, and she didn't give us a straight answer. So
well, I don't know if you heard Gabe Roberts complaining about having to do international travel during the World Series, and the people of Canada were none too pleased with the Dodgers manager. So
yeah. I love baseball in Canada. In fact, I just watched a documentary about why the Expos died on Netflix, which is actually pretty good.
I just started watching it. I'm not through the whole thing yet.
It's pretty good. Yeah, I enjoyed it. All right. Anyway, our guest did not get up early after a late flight to come on the show to listen to Chad and I talk about the World Series.
Hey, we don't know that.
It's important stuff, Rob.
It is. It is the national pastime.
Yeah.
Josh, thank you. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
And I'm, with you, Rob. I married into a Yankees family, so I appreciate you still rocking that hat.
Always.
But I find myself cheering very hard for the Dodgers right now.
Wow, love it. You guys are the two.
I've been rooting, despite the fact that Don Mattingly is on the Blue Jays bench. I can't root for a team that has George Springer on it. I can't. Just not going to do it. Anyway, Josh, wanted to have you on. You made some headlines recently with an audit of Stark County. And it's not unusual for an entity being audited to perhaps disagree with the findings of the audit. That's normal stuff. It's not even a bad thing necessarily. Your audit specifically, it had some minor findings, but the chief one that we're going to talk about today is you found that Stark County, your office found that Stark County had been exceeding a statutory limit on their general fund balance. And as a result, your conclusion was Stark County shouldn't have been levying a property tax until that balance comes down. Stark County's contention was we are shaping our property tax in such a way that it draws down the general fund balance over time. They think that's a better approach. Your argument is that approach isn't allowed in the law. But here's where things get a little bit dicey. In the audit report, and I read this report when the issue first came up. In the audit report, Stark County's response, because if anybody who's ever read an audit report, there's a section where the auditor basically puts their conclusions in, and then the audited entity responds. And a lot of times you'll say, we agree, we don't agree, and then they give their reasons and or say what they're going to do to remedy the situation or what have you. In this instance, in your audit report, Stark County's response began with, we agree. But the actual response that Stark County sent your office, which was, and this was all reported in excellent reporting in the Dickinson Press, they didn't have the words "we agree" in there. They provided kind of the nuanced explanation that I just summarized a moment ago, which is that they're shaping their property tax policy to draw the balance down over time, but they didn't say that we agree. Your office added that. And to me, I guess that's, as somebody who quotes other people a lot for a living, I would never add words to something that they said.
So to clarify that, Rob.
Okay, sure.
So our response, we set our standard protocol is we want our clients to either state we agree or we disagree and then provide their response. So my team, when they provided that initial response, we did email them back saying we needed this statement in. We have a response back from the county auditor saying, is that all I need to add? And we've got all the documentation. We provided that to the Dickinson Press. So that is just our standard protocol to be clear with our readers and the individuals that we're trying to communicate this information with. And that really stems back to auditing standards. If they state that they disagree, we are required by standards then to provide a response to further clarify the finding and the facts that we uncovered. So really that is more of a internal procedure based on standards that we follow. We did want that added, but we did communicate back and forth with the Stark County auditor on that addition. So that's not something that we just added without them, but it is something that we wanted based on our auditing procedures and our standard protocol.
So Josh, are the officials in Stark County being dishonest with how they're responding to this whole thing? I mean, they seem to indicate in the article that they were surprised that the language "I agree" or "we agree" was included in the management response to the audit. Are they just not being forthright with the citizens in Stark County?
I don't know all of the internal workings over there. Our primary point of contact with a lot of these is the county auditor. They are the chief financial officer for the county. If my team is working with them and they did not communicate that with county commissioners, that's a communication issue, potential communication issue on their end. But again, our primary focus is working with that county auditor to get these responses.
The county auditor is quoted, the Stark County auditor and treasurer, she holds both titles, is a woman by the name of Karen Richard. And this is what she told the Dickinson Press. She said, "I wrote our responses for the audit for Stark County, and I don't think they should have changed them, but I do appreciate them clarifying why they changed the language." And here's where I'm kind of stuck on ultimately this report's not written for Stark County or your office. You guys are all involved in this. You're writing this report for someone like me or the news media or the general public. When I read that report, there was no "we agree" was right in there. There was no indication that the "we agree" was coming from your office and not Stark County. When I read it as, okay, Stark County is saying that they agree. And then I thought the rest of the response was kind of odd because it was like, well, they don't agree though. I read like "we agree," and then I read the rest of the response. They don't agree. And I guess maybe I should have drilled down into it more. But when I first read it, I was confused. And again, in my writing, if I was going to say something about what they said, I would make it clear these are my words. Like, this is what they said. This is my interpretation of what they said. Your office didn't do that. You just added words to their quote. And to me, I think that's the problem.
Well, again, Rob, we wanted them to state "we agree" or "disagree." That should be the beginning of every response.
Why do they have to? Is that required? I understand that it's your practice to do that, but are they required by law to say? Listen, when I interview people a lot, I would sometimes like them to give me a yes or no answer, but they sometimes don't give me the answer that I'm looking for, and I don't think that gives me license to pencil in what I think they should have said.
Well, and again, when you read Stark County's response on this, it's almost like they're trying to take a middle of the road approach. They acknowledge they understand what the law says, but they chose to do what they did anyway. That's essentially kind of paraphrasing
Sure.
what they. So we needed clarification. Do you agree with our finding, or do you disagree with our finding? Because again, if it's a disagreement with our finding, then we're required by standards to put in that additional response for further clarification for the audience. Yes, for the media, for the citizens, we want that clarity to have a response in there that's kind of just a middle of the road. It's not either way. It is ambiguous. We did point that out to the county auditor before the report was finalized.
Are
And we did
you?
get that confirmation back?
I don't mean to interrupt, but I just want to be. In order for you to have a response, does it have to say we disagree, or can you just look at what they responded and say, okay, this requires additional response?
Well, and that's a good question, Robin. That's something internally that we've kind of talked about now, because yes, the response that they provided, it again, it's kind of in the middle. But if you look at this, that their response and maybe some of the corrective action that we are looking for in that response, it's still out of compliance with the law. And so
Sure.
maybe a better approach here. Maybe we should have just responded.
I
Provided
want
additional
to
clarification.
I want to make it clear that in this instance, I agree with your finding. The law seems to say what it says. They are in excess of the cap on their general fund balance. And I don't know that the law provides for the remedy that they've implemented for that. All that being said, and maybe this is the journalist in me, I get the hives a little bit at the idea of putting words in their mouth. Things that their response may be frustrating to you, or maybe frustrating to me or anybody else, but their response is their response. And you added 2 words that weren't in their response.
But again, we did go back to them before the official report was finalized. We did clarify that we would want them to say that we agree or that they disagree. And we confirmed it, we basically added the we agree and verified with the county auditor, and her response back was essentially, is that all you needed for this response? And then we went forward with it.
Josh, can I pull way back? And obviously the state auditor's office conducts audit for local political subdivisions all the time. And so can you just talk about, was this just normal course of business that you were in Stark County, or was there a specific reason that you were alerted to that led you to do this audit about Stark County and their ending fund balance?
So great question. So we've been working with Stark County for some time now, and a lot of the budget work that we've been doing really started back in 2020, and that's kind of when we started looking at enhancing our budget testing processes for these county audits. And back then, and I've got some of the numbers. So back in 2020, the fund balance for Stark County was $20.1 million. And their expenditures were about $11.86 million. So that statutory threshold should be in that probably $8 to $9 million range, is kind of the cap for their carry forward allowance in accordance with Century Code. You go forward to, and we started identifying some of these in those earlier reports, working with them. 2021, their expenditures and transfers for the general fund were about a little more than $12 million. Their fund balance was $22.39 million. In 22, their expenditures and transfers were about $14 million, and their fund balance is $21 million. And then we get to 2023, their expenditures for the general fund is $11.69 million, and the fund balance is $21.65 million. So they've maintained pretty steady around that $21 million fund balance, and we have been working with them and trying to educate them on here are the statutory constraints on what they should be doing, and communicating this with them. My audit teams have been working with Stark County. They appreciate working with Stark County on this. But really our focus is, these are the laws of North Dakota. These are some of the constraints that we want to make sure are managed so that we're not overtaxing our citizens. Another example, we've been working with Montreal County. And we kind of started working with Montreal County on a lot of these budgets over the same time period. And what we've been able to accomplish and work with Montreal County on is back in 2020, they were assessing significant mill levies, and we were working with them on their budget and some of these capital projects. And what we found is the same capital project was built into their budgets for multiple years. And so that project was in there. Mill levies were assessed based on those projected expenditures. And taxpayers probably paid for those 2 or 3 times. And so working with them, we've got them to clean up their budgeting process, which improves transparency to the citizens. But they've actually reduced their mill levies down to essentially zero. But their fund balance is probably in excess of $240 million.
Josh, can you talk about what does Century Code say in terms of an ending fund balance? Is it a percent? Obviously I don't follow this stuff, and I think the listeners probably don't. Is it a percentage of their previous year's budget, or is it a total dollar amount, or what does Century Code say in terms of?
So what Century Code puts out as part of the stipulations or the restrictions on the carry forward allowance is 75% of your previous appropriated general fund budget. So that's why when we look at those general fund expenditures, or when I was listing those out, if those general fund expenditures were $11.69 million at the end of that fiscal period, their carry forward limit is 75% of that. And when we see, an entity like Stark County, or somebody that we've been working with, when they have the cash reserve balance that they do, which is in excess of what that allowance is, and they're still assessing a general fund property tax mill. And I think in 2023 for Stark County, it was about 25.88 mills for $5.4 million. And that's where they're going to maintain that cash reserve balance.
I think we all, given that North Dakota is a commodity-based economy, we know there's ups and downs, and I don't think many voters probably find the idea that all levels of government have some reserves. They could have addressed this by dedicating some of those revenues or some of those funds into a specific fund for a purpose, right?
Yes.
I want to say get around the cap, but that's not the way. The cap applies to the general fund. They probably want to keep it in the general fund because it keeps that money fluid, I guess, where they can use it for lots of different things as opposed to committing it to one thing. But there is that mechanism where they could start a building fund or something for a project that they have and fill that up. Okay.
So, that's a fantastic tool, and we encourage our clients to do that, those capital improvement funds. And I think it's some of the articles that I've read, they Stark County's talked about an airport project where they want to put money into it, and they want to be able to do so without incurring debt. Well, those capital improvement funds, if you set those up, you can assess up to 10 mills for those funds. And if you need to go beyond that, it requires a vote of the people. But there are specific requirements and restrictions. But that is definitely an avenue that they could go. They could create that. They could assess some of those mills. They could put those dollars into those funds. When they get the necessary resources, they could then start those projects.
In the past, Josh, we have seen some conflict between your office and some of the entities that you have audit, local governments and whatnot. And there were some, I think fair to say there's some trust issues there. We had talked about before, or maybe you had talked about putting some of this behind. Can you see where maybe this creates a trust issue where an audited entity sends in their response and then words get added to their response?
Again, Rob, I would disagree with it. The response that we provided back was saying that we would like them to say either we agree. They could have said, no, we disagree. But again, that's for our auditing standards and our protocols. Sure. And that's what we're following, and that's something.
Well, is there a different way though to follow those protocols to where, like, you get their response, you didn't get the we agree or disagree that you wanted? Can you just put in there? Listen, we asked them to say if they agree or not. This is the response they gave us. It's ambiguous, and deliver that to the public rather than attributing words to them that they didn't say.
Again, we went back to the county auditor to verify that's, do they agree or do they disagree? And
okay.
the auditor response that we got back.
but the auditor in the Dickinson Press says, I wrote our response for the audit for Stark County, and I don't think they should have changed them.
Rob, I'd be happy to share the email correspondence back and forth from my team to the county auditor.
Okay.
Josh, now that, so you've been doing these audits with Stark County, you referenced numbers for 4 years where they've been over their legally allowed ending fund balance. So what now? Is there does the state fine them for not following that law, or is it just you sort of make the public aware and then what happens?
So for the auditor's office, our work ends. We provide this information. My focus is on transparency and bringing some of this stuff to light. But this really is an issue that has to be dealt with locally. There's no penalties assessed by the auditor's office. I don't think that there's any other penalties in law for exceeding these reserves. But again, my focus is trying to educate, the citizens when they are being assessed taxes. And you look at 2023, 2024, we were all facing unprecedented inflationary costs, and $5.4 million on the citizens in that community. That may be hundreds and hundreds of dollars on a property tax bill that may have helped go a long ways in covering just living costs. And so this is some of the transparency that I focus on, education and sharing this with folks like you who have a voice in the media, getting this information out to the people. I want to see more engaged and informed citizens. I hear time and time again, these local governments have their budget meetings and nobody shows up.
Yep.
Nobody is there to ask questions. And we need people paying attention. We need the local citizens better understanding what their government is doing, how their government is collecting taxes, and how their government is spending their money.
Well, again, I don't think the problem here is with the finding. Because again, and whatever, and I even accepting that I don't think Stark County's explanation is on its own is all that unreasonable. I just don't think the law allows for it. So I think the finding was accurate. I don't know about adding the words. Hey, let's switch gears though and talk about DOGE a little bit. And I'm not talking about the federal DOGE. It's Department of Government Efficiency. It's a North Dakota effort to promote some efficiency within our government. It got off to a pretty strong start, I think, right after the session when the legislature, sort of, I don't know what you want to say, commissioned or blessed this process. But, I think a lot of times, it's the low-hanging fruit gets eaten first. Now it's into, I think one of the headlines recently was that North Dakota is going to be taking a slower approach to cost savings. Your office is involved in this process, which makes a lot of sense. Tell us, where are we at in this process? How is it going?
Well, we've had, several meetings, a lot of good discussion. We've had 3 agencies provide some information. We had the Department of Health and Human Services kind of go through some of those programs and some of the funding sources, some of the expenditures. Department of Commerce, we did some additional information requests, some of the different programs that they have. So we collected some information on some of the workforce programs. I was surprised in Commerce's presentation when they said there's 80 different workforce programs across the state, and so we wanted to better understand some of the data that they were providing to us. So we worked with Legislative Council to collect some of that. And we also had North Dakota Information Technology come in and present some of that information. And I think what we learned a lot is we don't have performance measures. There's nothing built into some of the code. And how do we collect some of this data? When we were working with Commerce, we were asking questions about how do we calculate return on investment? Is the money that we're putting into these programs, are they achieving desirable results? If we're going to put $1 million into a workforce program, is it affecting change? Is it moving the needle? Are we bringing workforce in? And how do we calculate some of that? And I think some of the things that we learned was we're not maybe tracking the data the way we should be. And so I think this is good for the legislators on the task force to hear maybe some of the ways that, for our office and the auditor's office, we do look at some of those metrics. We would love to be able to evaluate using that as some criteria, but it's not there in some of the initial collection. And so my hope is what comes out of this is we're going to start seeing maybe some changes in the way the laws and programs are developed and funded on the front end through the legislative process. In the last meeting, I think what we talked about was let's start tackling some more broad-based systemic issues. I think procurement was one of those. If you look through some of our findings, and I know you look through a lot of our reports, Rob, procurement seems to be a pretty common theme where we have findings where purchases aren't done properly, whether it's through the contracting RFPs. We see issues with the use of the purchasing cards. And so those are fairly common findings that we see out there, which is a topic that I believe it was Representative Bosch brought up, that would be a good one for maybe OMB to come in and do a presentation about some of the laws. And are the laws too cumbersome, or is it, some other reason why some of these issues keep popping up?
Josh, I love the idea of having a task force look at government efficiency. I hate the idea that we're calling it DOGE to copycat what's happening in Washington. But I do, your comments there about we don't have that sort of process in place to assess if programs are working or not. Is that not a failure of the legislature? I mean, we watch these appropriations committees where they're making decisions on millions and millions of dollars. Shouldn't the legislature, before they appropriate the money or reappropriate the money, be asking the question, what kind of bang? Like, why do we have to have a task force to do that? Shouldn't the legislature just be doing this?
That's a great question. I would encourage you to maybe visit with some of the legislators on the task force to.
But Josh, I'm trying to set you up to make some news here, taking shots at the legislature.
From the auditing standpoint, we've been talking about this for a long time. We would love to see some of these performance metrics built in on the front end. How do we define success? Or what does success look like? If we're trying to impact positive change with taxpayer money to move that needle, what is that? What does that mean? Because there's many different ways you can evaluate some of these programs. But having some of that built in on the front end, my hope is that this task force, and we call it TOGE to make sure it's not misinterpreted from DOGE. But again, having those metrics on the front end, thinking about this, and then being able to evaluate at the end, did we achieve success, whatever that metric is? And at that point, those could be decision variables. Do we continue funding a program? Do we need to change the program? Or do we just, we tried it, we thought we could do something, and turns out it didn't work.
And because it's okay to try things.
Yes,
and not everything's going to work.
No.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's afraid of in the economic development. Is I want them sometimes to take a shot at something.
Yep.
Do we know it's going to work? No, it might not. I mean, the economy is complicated. There's all sorts of different variables. I will tell you that during the campaign season last year, because of in the Republican gubernatorial primary, obviously the lieutenant governor candidate for Tammy Miller, her running mate, was Josh Gallion, who at the time was the head of the Commerce Department. And I had some stories about some businesses that he was involved with in different ways, or family members or friends were involved with, getting some money from the Department of Commerce, so whether that was handled appropriately. But I will tell you, as I started reviewing that, I started finding like grant programs and loan programs and stuff in the Department of Commerce that I had never heard of. I was like shocked that there's this spider web of programs. And part of me is thinking like there's just some obscure board that's making decisions and handing out millions and millions of dollars. And nobody hears about it. It doesn't really get reported on. Nobody but the members are going to the meetings. And I'm just thinking to myself, I mean, at what point do we look back and say, did this do anything? Right. And like Chad said, I don't want to be afraid of failure. I mean, we take a shot at something, but I do want to, when something doesn't work, I would like to stop doing it. And I think that's something we're not good at. And I don't know if it's a product, Chad's thing, why is it the legislature engaged? I would argue that maybe starting this task force is a way of them engaging, but also, I mean, I think it's a valid criticism wherein, and maybe it's a product of the fact that it's a citizen legislature and they're part-time. And so the oversight that has to happen in the interim, that doesn't get as much attention as the regular session. I think it's probably a product of having a part-time legislature, but yeah, I mean, at some point we need to look at some of this stuff and say, what did it, or even before we get to the point of spending the money, it's like, what does working look like? What does it look like? Did we hire X number of people? Did we bring in a certain number of movie companies? I mean, what is it that we're doing? So I think those are all excellent questions.
Well, and to have some targets. I mean, if you have a program and your goal is you want to bring in 100 people.
Sure.
Saying that on the front end, here's our expected outcome.
Right.
If you bring in 80, okay, well, why did we not quite reach our target? But what if you brought in 200? Great. This seems to be,
let's do more of this. Let's do more of this because it's working.
Because North Dakota, we need more workforce.
But I think what they're afraid of is if you draw a specific. I'm just thinking politically. I think what they're afraid of is if you draw a specific number, like we think it'll bring in 100 people, and then it brings in 90, and it's like, well, that's still pretty good, but the headline's going to be it fell short, right? I think they're afraid of that, which I think is fair because bringing in 90, maybe that's pretty good, right?
I mean, to me, it's good to have goals, And,
sure, yeah.
You set those goals, you set those targets, and you measure how close did you get. And for me, I love setting goals that are so far out that I probably never reach them, but I measure how close did I get. And to me, that's success. So that's part of the messaging. And you talk about some of the economic development issues, and I think our legislature now is more focused on some of those things. I had a lot of discussions about the North Dakota Development Fund during session. The legislature did provide an appropriation for us to contract a private firm to do a performance audit, looking at those loan and equity portfolios that we have within the development fund, to try to measure, are we doing things right? Because when you read those audits that are on our website, you see a loan portfolio that, with the impairment is valued at 50 cents on the dollar. Equity portfolio that's valued at 5 cents on the dollar when you look at their allowance for impairments. And so those are very, low returns. And so I think some of the legislature, what they're looking at, is this a good use of taxpayer money? And I know part of the frustrations that I heard from many legislators is within that audit report, there's a note in there that talks about related party transactions. And board members who have financial interests in companies are getting some of these loans. And so I've had conversations with Governor Armstrong. When I brought that to his attention, I think his response is that ends right now. And so again, I think you're having a different approach, a different tone. I do think the legislature is moving towards more transparency, more accountability. This whole TOGE discussion, as we call it, talking about performance metrics, I do see a greater appetite. And I found in the last meeting, if you go back and watch, Joe Morrison, our OMB director, made a comment that we tried to do a lot of these performance metrics, and I can't remember if he said it was like back in the 80s or the 90s, and it was met with tremendous resistance by a lot of the agencies. And the at that point said, okay, just stop doing it. So we do have history of we've tried to put these in. And in my previous job before being the state auditor, I was the chief financial officer of the Public Service Commission. And we used, back then it was an IBARS is what the system was called. Then there was an area where OMB had built in, how do you track performance measures and those types of things, but it was never something that was really used. So we do have a history of, we've tried to do these. There wasn't the legislative appetite potentially back then, but it seems like that's shifting. And I wonder if that's not the external impact of DOGE putting pressure on, we need to be better stewards of government resources. We need to make sure that we've got better accountability, better transparency. And I'm really encouraged because of some of these additional projects that the legislature has asked the auditor's office to do with the development fund. We also have another performance audit they've asked us to do, the Private Securities and Investigators Board performance audit, which we're working on right now, because they want to better understand what's happening within these entities, get better information back to the decision makers so that next session they can really evaluate, are these good programs and are they being successful?
Well, I think it's good work that's needed. Josh, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, John.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Hey, Plain Talk listeners, have something to say? Call or text Plain Talk with your questions, comments, or headlines you want us to cover.
Just dial 701-587-3141. Leave us your message or shoot us a text with your name and location, and you could be featured on an upcoming show.
Hi, my name is Ashley, and I am in Jamestown.
Hey, Rob and Chad. My name's Tony. I live in Grand Forks.
That's 701-587-3141.
Call us, text us, vent, praise.
We want you in the conversation. Thanks for being part of the show.
Now let's get back to today's episode.
Welcome back. Happy to be with you. Just finished up our interview with Josh Gallion. And I think he's doing some really good work. You know, some of what we talked about at the end there about, I have always been very skeptical of a lot of our economic development programs. Some of these just seems like we're just doling out money to people who are going to do business in our state anyway. I like that. The one thing I struggled with was his explanation for adding those words to Stark County's response. I don't think there's any justification for it.
Yeah, I said, well, first of all, I think the DOGE thing and the TOGE, I'm interested in what TOGE stands for, but we ran
I think it's Task Force of Government Efficiency.
Well, you know, if it's called a task force, you know it's going to get something done. That's one thing I know what government task force is. But I think one of the things that didn't get mentioned, but when we're talking about the people looking at the Commerce Department, I think Matt Fern, our producer, deserves some credit for calling attention to the one North Dakota Film Grant program. I think that's just a small component of something that's much, much bigger. But going back to Stark County, I think I struggle a little bit. I mean, on one hand, Josh is saying, I told them they knew this was being added. And then the auditors in the paper saying something different. I don't know who's right and who's wrong.
He says he's got an email. He says he's got an email exchange that justifies it. I don't know. Like, if it's not something that they want to be, I would never add words to a quote.
Right.
No, if I write my interpretation of what I think that quote is or how it fits in with other information, I'm going to write it, but that's going to be in my voice, not theirs.
So my first planned question for Josh was going to be, I've been involved in audits before, and if somebody would change my manager response to an audit, you know what I would do is fire the auditor. But then he got into the sort of, they knew, we didn't know, whatever. And so it's hard to even know what the facts are there. And the auditor might have gotten herself into a little bit of trouble by agreeing to it. And then the board, the county commission didn't like that she agreed. So who knows what's going on? What I do know is, got to follow the law. And I worry that there's no teeth at all to actually make political subs follow the law. And I also think the county commission in Stark County, I know some of those folks, they're really, really good. Conservative. Well, I don't know even though that their explanation, it's not like it's wrong. It's not like they're being crooks or doing something terrible.
Illegal.
I just don't think the law allows them to do it that way. Right. So it's not like they're doing it so that somebody's brother-in-law can get a contract. It's nothing like that. It's like a very procedural thing, and they're just not proceeding correctly in accordance with the law. But again, I mean, I don't think that they're doing anything necessary. Maybe even this is a reasonable way to address it, but the law just doesn't. I just don't see where in the law it allows for that, and that's problematic. And I do think, you know, to the auditor's point, where, you know, if they could kind of exceed these caps, then it maybe allows them to get around some things that would normally require them to go to the voters to get approval for. Now you're not just subverting that specific piece of law about the cap. Now you're subverting other law that would require you to go and get authorization from the voters to do certain things. I mean, that's why that law's got to be in there. How do you enforce it? I don't know. How do you enforce a law like that when the local prosecutor is also the attorney for the county? Yeah. You know, I don't know what the mechanism is.
But also, is the law sort of dumb if you can earmark the money for specific uses and still keep it in the same way? I mean, I always say you can earmark
maybe
money.
the law is dumb. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
the law is dumb, and they ought to just let them.
And again,
do
I have
that.
some sympathy for the people in Stark County. I mean, they've been through the economics ups and downs
Sure.
of oil in the past. I mean, some of those folks might be thinking we have to have reserves that are really high because God knows what's going to happen with oil prices.
Right. No, I don't blame it. And none of this is Josh's fault. Josh is his job. This is what the law says. This is what you're doing. These things are in tension. His office is absolutely right. If the law's dumb, that's a problem for the legislature.
Yep.
To fix.
And we want an auditor who's going to go out and look at this stuff and whatever.
Sure.
But again, I think your question about what does this do for relationships with political subs and trying to have less of that conflict, this doesn't help.
No, I think there was a way to accomplish what he was trying to accomplish without just adding the words in as if it was part of their statement. Maybe they need to put check boxes on the form or something. Do you agree or disagree? And they can mark one and then offer their response. And then if they don't, but I mean, at some point, I've dealt with people who just won't answer a question directly. Yeah. And if they don't do that, I just note it. Like I asked them, this is what they said. I don't really feel like it was answering what I asked. And then you have to move on. But at some point you have to accept they said what they said. And now Josh says he has email correspondence that further makes his case. I have not yet seen that.
But also I think to your point, they can respond to the responses even if they say we agree or they don't say I agree. I mean, I didn't get the sense from him there's anything other than their internal processes is why they can't respond to a response. And maybe that's the cleaner way to do it without changing people's words.
I agree. What else do we want to tell you? You want to talk about the Ethics Commission a little bit? There's a standoff about appointing 3 new members to the Ethics Commission. It's gotten a little bit interesting. And it's what's frustrating to me about that situation, Chad. So the state constitution requires a consensus between the governor, the Senate Majority Leader, and the Senate Minority Leader. That's Kelly Armstrong, David Hogue, and Kathy Hogan, respectively. They have a consensus on 3 appointees. I think it's former OMB Director Pam Sharp, a gentleman who works for an engineering firm in Mandan, whose name is escaping me, and a Fargo attorney, Mark Western. They all 3 agree these are fine candidates. But Hogue and Hogan want Murray Sogsveen, who's a current member of the commission, they want him to be one of the 3 appointees. The Governor Armstrong has said, absolutely not. I'm not reappointing him. And his justification for that is he feels that the Ethics Commission currently has been doing something, and I agree with this, frankly, has been doing some things that are beyond their legal remit, and thinks Sogsveen is going to continue to enable that and doesn't want to appoint him. So that's where the standoff is right now. As we're recording this, there has been no movement on that. They could solve this very quickly. In the meantime, I brought up another issue. The terms for the existing members of the Ethics Commission are up. Yet they continue to meet as a part of the commission, which I don't think they have legal standing to do that. They don't have lawful appointees right now. They don't have a quorum. Which I think, frankly, should ought to light a fire under the 3 deciders on this and get them to get to a consensus so we can get the Ethics Commission back to work.
So I have a couple observations. One, I have great admiration for Murray Sogsveen. I know Murray. I think he's an extremely honorable person, military, National Guard, been appointed to a lot of different positions by Republican governors in the state, has a strong reputation of being a straight shooter and honest. I know you pointed out some things in your article about his time at the university system and maybe some stuff on the ethics. I'm ecstatic that Pam Sharp is willing to do this and that they've agreed to her, because I know Pam and I think she'll be tremendous on that board. I don't know the other 2 folks that they've agreed to. But just sort of taking a step back, I mean, it is amazing that when the Ethics Commission was set up, there was the guarantee of 1 Democrat, guarantee of 1 Republican legislator, and then the governor. And the reason they did that was to make sure that there's political consensus. I never came up with a scenario where it'd be the Democrat and the Republican disagreeing with the Republican governor on who the appointee should be. Right. I always thought it'd be the Democrat who was sort of holding out.
I think for Hogue, there's a personal connection there to Sogsveen. They both have a shared National Guard. I know Mr. Sogsveen is well respected in those circles. I think the problem that the governor has is just the status quo at the Ethics Commission, wherein, we're not exactly seeing a lot of public. I mean, I know they say that they're resolving things behind the scenes, and maybe the fact that we can't see that's not really their fault. But we've had one ethical finding issued in 7 years, and it was issued a year after that person was convicted of the crime. That is their primary purpose. I don't know that they're doing it all that well. And meanwhile, they're issuing legal opinions without the legislature weighing in, without the courts or the executive branch weighing in. They issue an opinion that makes it legal to spend campaign funds on something like childcare. This despite a constitutional prohibition on using campaign funds for personal purposes. I don't think it's unreasonable for the governor to look at that situation, among other problems, and say, I don't like the status quo. I want 3 fresh people. I don't think that's an unreasonable position.
So first of all, I would say is we can talk about the pace of their investigations, and we've talked about that at length on here. Maybe they're not moving fast enough, but I also believe the legislature has done everything in their power to underfund them, so they fail.
But Kelly Armstrong's not the legislature.
No, correct. But to the point about the pace,
and that was a point I paid out. I think both the legislature and, frankly, I think our Attorney General Drew Wrigley's at times bombastic response to some of what's going on in the Ethics Commission, I think has kind of left Kelly in a bad position where he has to take this, what I think is a reasonable stand on its own, in the context of, malfeasance is probably a strong word from the legislature, but obstinance from the legislature vis-a-vis the Ethics Commission. I think it's left Kelly with a weaker hand than he could have had.
So let's do some analysis here, though. We both know Kelly Armstrong relatively well. He's been to several meetings where he said, I'm never voting for Murray Sagsveen. He's never going to vote for Murray Sagsveen. I mean, there's no political pressure. I can't imagine a scenario where Kelly's now going to go into a meeting and say, okay, I agree that we should appoint Murray Sagsveen. So that leaves us where you started. They've agreed to 3 candidates for 3 open spots. That's where, I don't see any other scenario where they land anywhere but with those 3. Unless, because the governor's not going to respond to calls to his office saying, please appoint Murray Sagsveen. There's not going to be enough where this becomes a political. The normal voter's not paying attention to this thing. You can't put enough political pressure on Kelly Armstrong to get him to move.
And in some ways, I think that because we're seeing some activists, Ellen Chafee is, she was part of the group that instituted the Ethics Commission. She's been doing some things. Dustin Goverlow, who's kind of a gadfly person, he's sent out some emails encouraging people to call in. To me, that's turning the Ethics Commission into exactly what it was never supposed to be, which was this political entity. And I am struggling with the argument that somehow Murray Sagsveen, whatever you think of him, is like this singular entity on which the future of the Ethics Commission hinges, when the 3 people who are making this decision have already agreed there's three other people among the finalists who are just fine, would do a fine job in their estimation. And again, what the Constitution requires is consensus. Like that word is used in the Constitution. Consensus means everyone agrees. So that doesn't mean the governor has to cave and go along with the other 2. That means they have to find a consensus, and they have. Let's move on.
So, Rob, what's the rationale for them not to just appoint 2 of the 3? Was it the governor who said either we do all of them or we do none of them?
I think part of it, I think gets into, because I've been thinking a lot about this when I wrote about whether or not the Ethics Commission has been meeting legally and whether they have a quorum. And I think Kelly's problem is, if you give them back a quorum, then the Ethics Commission can just sally forth and they can filibuster the last pick in perpetuity, because the Ethics Commission can continue functioning. Now, I guess the opposite argument of that, and I heard some people saying, well, this just allows, the politicians to obstruct the ethics commission if they won't make the appointments. Yeah, but on the other hand, it also allows the ethics commission, which tried to put their finger on the scale about that. And I think this is another thing that the ethics commission really did poorly, is they wrote a letter asking for Sogsveen's reappointment. And they also, when they first announced the vacancies, they announced 2 vacancies, but didn't announce Sogsveen's vacancy because they just assumed he was going to be reappointed. It's not their decision to make. It's not the ethics commission's decision to make. I think they overstepped there. But I think the dynamic is there needs to be some pressure on making a decision here. And if you just appoint 2, I think it takes pressure off, and I think that's wrong. They need to just make the decision and move on.
So my concern here is this is starting to feel like the North Dakota PERS board to me, in terms of, if you remember, the PERS board sued the state, that led to the Christmas tree bill.
Oh, I remember.
Yeah. And then it wasn't just for you, it's for the listeners as well. And then the legislature went ahead and changed who's on the PERS board. They did wholesale changes on the PERS board, fired the executive director, Scott Miller, and then all of a sudden the lawsuit went away, right? I mean, all those things. I feel like there's sort of something similar happening with the Ethics Commission. Let's change who's on the ethics board. They want to fire Rebecca Binstock. Drew Wrigley said it. Well, Drew Wrigley didn't say that, but he said that. And then there's potential, you've talked about the potential lawsuits regarding the Ethics Commission, and the North Dakota legislature does not like when people push back on them too hard from a government board, or like that's not what they like. And they're not above changing the outcome by changing the participants on a board. And I fear that's what's going to happen, just like what happened.
But again,
this
isn't the legislature. The legislature has nothing to do. This is an entirely separate. In fact, the only two legislators who are involved in this are kind of on your side of the argument.
Bigger picture, though, Rob, I'm talking about the underfunding, all of these different things. And
right,
but I don't know 2 of the 3 people they've got consensus on. So this all might be garbage, and these 2 people are not going to come in there and do wholesale changes. But I mean,
why are we assuming that wholesale changes would be a bad thing? I mean, again, when we're not seeing progress, we've seen a big breakdown. I mean, whether you want to, and listen, I've had plenty of blame for the legislature. I'm not exonerating the legislature's obstinance in this at all, but it's also a two-way street. And I don't think it's helpful when, if you're the legislative lawmaking branch, you are going to be annoyed when another upstart branch of government appropriates to themselves the power to legislate, which is what the Ethics Commission has done.
The upstart government agency.
Upstart insofar as they are exceeding their constitutional bounds. The Constitution assigns the legislature the power to write law. Yeah. But the Ethics Commission has written law, have they not?
Yeah. So
previously, I think we all would have said it's illegal to spend campaign funds on childcare or something like home security. And now you flip around and the Ethics Commission waved the pen and waved a magic wand, and now it's legal.
Yeah. So I'm not opposed to wholesale changes. I think the wholesale changes should be to fully fund the Ethics Commission and give it a chance to work.
But that's an argument for the legislature.
Sure.
The governor, he can't, I mean, he can write a budget and he can make recommendations, but the legislature is going to do what they're going to do. His only option, I guess he could have vetoed the Ethics Commission budget, but does that help?
No. It doesn't help. And again, I think that there's blame to go around here. I think the flames were fueled by Drew Wrigley last session by being so aggressive. And now Kelly Armstrong and Marie Sagsveen are the 2 people sort of sitting at the table. With all that being said, like at some point, they just need to not be in the media. The Ethics Commission just needs to function, and not everything has to be a fight. And I like Marie Sagsveen. I think he's an honorable guy, but if it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen.
Yeah. And by the way, it's not just, although I think it's an important one, It's not just the opinion about, using campaign finances for childcare. It's some other stuff too. There was right down to the last hours of the legislative session, there was a fight over campaign finance reform. The legislature was absolutely wrong in exempting itself from some of the reporting requirements. And in fact, I think violates the section of the Constitution that created the Ethics Commission. All that being said, the fact that the legislature failed to act in that way does not give the Ethics Commission license to begin rewriting campaign finance funds and then also appropriating to themselves oversight over campaign finances that the law already assigns to the Secretary of State's office. Because you gotta remember, they're in conflict with Secretary of State Michael Howe, who is not an unreasonable person, who in fact cares very much about getting better campaign finance data. He lobbied long and hard with it. As a matter of fact, at like 3:00 in the morning, he and I were still texting on that last day of the legislative session, watching in awe of what was happening on campaign finance stuff. So,
and he and his office got the crap beat out of him at the end of the
right.
session.
But now the Ethics Commission's in conflict with him too. So you say that you're afraid of wholesale change. I think some change would be very, very good.
I didn't say I'm afraid of wholesale change. I'm afraid
sure.
I want wholesale change that's different than the wholesale change that I think we're going to get. Fund them, Rob.
I don't know.
Give the staff that they need. That's how the wholesale changes we need.
Sure. I'd be okay with that. But also, I think that maybe the funding will be more forthcoming if the legislature is not perceiving the Ethics Commission as exceeding some of their bounds in some of
I think
ways.
that's completely fair.
Yeah. All right, we're going to end it there.
And I think we can both also agree that Kelly Armstrong isn't backing down because he gets 25 phone calls.
Yeah, you're not. They're just. Yeah, you would think that David Hogue, of all people, after watching what happened during the property tax debate, might realize the governor's not going to budge on this.
Skin in the game, if you recall. Skin in the game.
Skin in the game. Yeah. Well, again, they've agreed on 3 people. I'm assuming Kathy Hogan and David Hogue agreed to those 3 people because they liked what they saw. Then, approve those people. All right, we got to end the show. Leave us a voicemail. Send us a text, 701-587-3141. Follow us on all the social media things, TikTok, YouTube, Facebook, X. Our handle is Plain Talk ND. Thank you so much for listening. By the way, we created some additional bonus social media content, which is Chad and I reacting to baseball stuff. So keep an eye out. That'll probably be dropping.
Yeah, and you'll like it because it makes the Dodgers look good and the Yankees look incompetent.
It does. I need to talk to Matt about choosing clips that make my Yankees look idiotic. That wasn't very much fun.
I'm not sure it's the clips that make them look idiotic.
Okay. All right. We're going to go. Thank you for listening. That's it for today on Plain Talk, the voice of North Dakota politics. Plain Talk is a production of Forum Communications Company. Got a question, comment, or suggestion? Leave us a voicemail or send us a text message at 701-587-3141. That's 701-587-3141. If you haven't subscribed to Plain Talk yet, you can find us on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform like Spotify or Apple Podcasts. For those of you who are already hooked, give us a rating or review. And don't forget to share or tell a friend. Special thanks to my co-host Chad Oban, and from myself and everyone at Plain Talk, thanks for listening. I, however, am fresh as a daisy and ready to go.